Welcome everybody to all our attendees from South Africa and international. Thank you for connecting with us today. So my name is Nhlamulo Ritsuri, and I'll be hosting our 16th SAICE Fireside Chat in collaboration with the SAICE Academy. We really hope that today's topic will be fruitful and thought-provoking. And just a reminder that we have a YouTube channel. You can search it SAICE TV. And there you can find all our previous fireside chats, and you can also find the SAICE podcast as well, and all other webinars and videos by the different committees. We'll also share the link in the chat for people to follow. And also, if you are currently watching on YouTube right now, please do like, share, and subscribe. I feel like an influencer. And hit the bell to turn on notifications for new videos, and let's grow the community. So we've also loaded some of the previous fireside chats on our online on-demand training for CPD. If you watch the video there, you'll see you're able to earn CPD points, and also there's an assessment test at the end of the video, so good luck with that. So for those who are also new to this platform, so we're here to talk and discuss and debate about civil engineering, innovation and smart technologies, matters of mutual importance to civil engineers. And we also engage and collaborate with other organizations as well, and also other fields of engineering. We host these chats on the second Thursday of every month, where we engage professionals, academics, and professional bodies, and also just industry-wide to share knowledge and experiences. We encourage all other professionals. Don't feel like you shouldn't join us if you're like a mechanical, electrical, because we have vast conversations here from people in industry, people who've retired with a lot of knowledge. So if you're interested, please do join our conversations, and follow us on all the other platforms as well to keep up with what we're doing. We do encourage your active participation during this webinar. Please feel free to raise your hand to ask questions. We're going to have a Q&A session towards the end. So you can also drop your comments and questions in the chat box, and then we'll attend to them when we get to the Q&A. And also, there used to be an assessment form to rate the session, but that's been cancelled. So let's start. So today, we aim to bridge the gap between textbook knowledge and real world experience. I'll never forget, we had a structures lecturer who told us that we'll probably never use 90% of the stuff that we learn in school. And he has been proven right. Much of what we do is what we learn on the job, in the field, and most importantly, through the guidance of experienced engineers. So when we think about civil engineering projects, the immediate thing that comes to mind is the finished product. So it's the beautiful buildings and spectacular bridges and massive stadiums. But there's crucial work that happens in the planning and execution of projects that ensures that they are successful. And when we think about a successful project, the obvious answer is delivering the agreed upon scope, on budget, and on time. And no one really cares what impact the project has on the future. We need to make it work now. So when we look at sustainability, it's often ignored to prioritize our current targets. But today's chat, we hope to understand the impact of ESG on an organization's long-term value and ethical practices. And this foundational work is very important, especially in increasing investor confidence. It's important to manage risks and opportunities to ensure a business's resilience. And this is exactly what we're here to talk about today. And our speakers deal with these matters on a daily basis in the mining space. So I'm honored to introduce them. I will start with Theodora Clark. This is someone that I've known personally, and we've walked our careers together for almost a decade now. Dora is a professional civil engineer and a project management professional. She holds a master's degree in housing and human settlements from Wits University. She also holds a BEng in civil engineering and an honors from the University of Pretoria. She has a history of 8 years in the consulting work, specializing in concrete structures in the built environment. And the past 4 years, she's been in the mining sector. She is currently the ESG Portfolio Management Office Manager at Exxaro, and she works in the Sustainability Department under the ESG and Climate Change team. And this portfolio ensures that projects addressing sustainability, community impact, environmental compliance, and governance practices are properly monitored and reported. Welcome, Dora. And then
Thank
I'll
you.
introduce Luyanda Ngongo. I hope I'm saying that right. Luyanda is a senior energy specialist at Exxaro Resources. He leads the strategy and innovation to drive energy efficiency and decarbonization across one of South Africa's largest mining operations. He's a professional engineer and a certified energy manager, and he has delivered large-scale projects that blend technical excellence with measurable carbon and cost savings. His work spans the rollout of ISO-aligned energy management systems, technology-driven fuel reduction and optimization pilots, and renewable integration in hard-to-abate sectors. Beyond Exxaro, he's committed to mentoring young engineers. So if we have young engineers here in this platform who are looking for managers, mentors in the energy space, you can, I'm guessing he's putting it out there so that we can say he can contact you, you guys can contact him. And advancing community energy initiatives that extend sustainability benefits beyond the mine. He's driven by a vision to position Africa as a global leader in sustainable energy innovation. Next up, we have Celiwe Kulu. She's a senior specialist in technology and innovation department at Exxaro Resources as well. She supports the organization in implementation and execution of sustainable growth and impact strategy. Her previous experience includes working as a reliability engineer for over 15 years, supporting countries throughout Africa in their asset optimization and management journey. She holds a national diploma in mechanical engineering, a BTech in business management. She also has an honors degree in psychology from the University of the Witwatersrand. I think we need to have coffee over this because I did not know this. She has a diploma in electrolysis process from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, and also an MBA from Gibbs. Yo, guys, please stay in school. Thanks, Celiwe. Last but not least, we have Kagiso Musanya. He's a project professional with 10 years of experience delivering complex and capital projects in mining infrastructure, bulk materials handling, coal power plants, and petrochemical plants. His strengths lie in project controls, contract management, project risk management, and PMO governance. He holds a Bachelor of Technology in Mechanical Engineering and a postgraduate diploma in Business Administration. He's a certified project management professional and a planning and scheduling professional with additional training in project risk management. And his expertise are supported by advanced training in Primavera, SAP, MS Project, and contract frameworks. And this positions him as a well-rounded professional in project planning, controls, and governance. So he's currently also at Exaro, where he's focusing on improving portfolio performance, embedding ESG priorities, and driving value through robust planning processes and systems. And he's working on social labor plans, mine closure, and rehabilitation projects. So we have an impressive team here to share with us their knowledge and their experience. And with that said, we can start the presentation from the team. Thank you.
Thanks, Ntambulo. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen, and you guys let me know when you can see the presentation.
I can see it. You can put it on
Just put it in
presentation mode.
Yeah, it's just lagging. Oh, there we go. All right, afternoon, everyone. As noted, my name is Dora Clark, and together with the team, we'll be presenting on ESG and climate change and how it influences the mining industry and product delivery. To begin, we'll just be giving a brief introduction to ESG. So I know myself, I'm a civil engineer, and I always thought that I knew a lot about ESG. So when I actually started working within the space, that's when I realized that my knowledge of ESG was quite surface level. So this is just to give us a bit of a background and a bit of a foundation as to what ESG is. So essentially, ESG is a set of non-financial indicators. I think that's key to note that it's non-financial. That basically help us better understand our risks and opportunities in terms of sustainability. So the term or the phrase or the initiative was first introduced at the UN Global Compact in 2004, where we basically then decided to introduce the concept around sustainability and ensuring that we leave the world the same way we found it. So maybe not the same way, but at least in as good a condition as we can. So ESG stands for essentially environmental, social, and governance. It has 3 pillars, and under those pillars are specific subsections, basically, that are focused on and looked at around in different corporations and organizations. So essentially, under the environmental pillar, we have decarbonization, we have energy efficiency and water management, air quality, biodiversity, waste management, as well as land management and rehabilitation. Under social, which is key social, is obviously the people. We have health and safety, which is a key concern specifically, not just within the mining industry, but in the construction sector as well, within all industries that require the use of human capital to execute on projects and delivery. It also looks at communities and basically their impact or how they are impacted through the organization's initiatives. We have employees under that umbrella as well, diversity and inclusion, as well as human rights. And then governance is essentially the framework that governs ESG. It looks at basically how ESG needs to function and how it's basically aligned and what opportunities and risks and frameworks basically are within the sector. We look at corporate governance, we look at compliance and risk management, ethics, transparent reporting, compliance, and then, as I noted, the governance framework. So just defining ESG as a status quo, not just within the mining industry, but just as a whole, it's one of the key things we need to look at as well and to understand is that ESG came about, as I noted, because a lot of the industries, and I know mining was a big player in that, was looking to basically just look at production. So it's about what can we get out of the earth, but it was never looking at how are we protecting the earth from ourselves, essentially. And not just the earth, but the communities around these mining towns, around these heavy industries, not just mining, but cars, mass agriculture, any of those industries that basically use large tracts of land that we harvest from and don't necessarily put anything back in. So the aim was for us to then look and say, all these things are required. We understand that from the industrial revolutions that we needed basically these materials and minerals to help us advance as a society, but also we realize that we are depleting the Earth's natural resources, and that we are basically ruining our status quo in terms of how the environment and the Earth basically is. So the aim was for them to put this in place to see how we can create sustainability and longevity for the people, communities, as well as the environment. So one of the ways as well, the key opportunities that we can look at in the space is the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs as they're commonly known. There are 17 of them. They cover poverty, hunger, health, education, just to name a few. So a lot of organizations have adopted these SDGs or SDGs that are specific to their, let's say, interest or their realm. So not all organizations will cater to all things in the SDGs, but it's basically just a way in which people can align their companies and see what are the key issues that need to be targeted in terms of ESG, in terms of sustainability, in terms of just global equality. Also, then we're looking at opportunities within carbon neutrality and net zero. So basically, what that means is that organizations can look to reduce their emissions through these terms. So carbon neutrality is essentially saying that, for example, a mining house has a certain set of emissions, which we'll talk to a bit later, but we are noting that production is not going to stop, so you will keep mining. So the aim is for you to then offset that through different projects and initiatives, such as the next point, renewable energy solutions, or trying to move to hybrid vehicles or biofuels, to say how can we basically offset what we're doing in terms of, for lack of a better word, pollution, by putting in factors or aspects that will basically help us to create a balance in terms of what we emit and what we basically can produce in terms of clean energy. And then net zero, on the other hand, is saying that, for example, a mining house, if you said that you were going to adopt net zero, you would basically stop your mining. So that would basically limit you basically stopping all your emissions. So neutrality would be to offset and to try and mitigate your emissions, while net zero is to say that we are stopping processes that would basically create those emissions and maybe pivoting your business to something completely different to ensure that you get net zero. So as I noted as well, opportunities within renewable energy. South Africa has a big boom in terms of solar panels, solar power, due to, well, we'll say load shedding has stopped, but we don't know for sure. But there's obviously space for that in terms of solar and wind energy to try and basically figure out ways in which we can provide cleaner energy to provide power. And then, as I noted as well, technological advancements such as hybrid vehicles and biofuels, which basically would replace things like diesel. So you would run your trucks or your vehicles on biofuels instead of diesel, which is a heavy pollutant. And then a lot of banks as well, in terms of opportunity, are practicing green lending. So essentially, green lending is the practice where banks will be prioritizing companies and organizations that can prove their ESG commitments and can prove that they are basically trying to fund projects that are ESG focused and ESG related, that will basically improve the environment and improve the communities that they work in. So a lot of banks are adopting these. So a lot of shareholders and stakeholders are very interested in ESG. So banks have also started to realize that that is also a way in which they can leverage positivity by ensuring that they put green lending in some of the fine print when you're signing contracts for loans and for lending. This is mainly linked to large organizations. Your specific personal loan will not have a green lending initiative attached to it. Then in terms of challenges, in terms of ESG, I think, as we know, we all run businesses or work for businesses that are looking to make profits. So capital requirements for ESG are actually quite intensive, and that makes it slightly unattractive to a lot of operations to say that, we're spending so much money on something that we will only reap the benefits for not even maybe in our lifetime. But I think it's just a lot of it is just about balancing your ESG commitments with your capital requirements. Then it's also technological readiness. So a lot of these things, like I've mentioned, even the biofuels, hybrid vehicles, a lot of them are still within their research and development phases. So it's nice to have, but it's not practical to try and convert your entire business to run off these solutions. So there is still a bit of a challenge in terms of technological readiness and how basically we can efficiently or more effectively transition from, one sort of resource intense organization to basically being more hybrid and more energy conscious. Then I think a big challenge in South Africa and in Africa as a whole, and the global South as a whole, is that, in terms of development, we are still developing as nations. So it is difficult to try and transition away from things like diesel and oil and coal when those are basically the lifeblood of industry. So it is also seen as, and this is a topic for conversation, is seen as unfair to expect the global South, which is Africa, India, and some of those other countries, to transition away from these minerals that are seen as heavy pollutants when we are still developing as nations. So there is that sort of pushback to say that while the global North, for example, the USA, England, and those other countries can push these renewable energy solutions and can push some of these hybrid advancements, there should maybe be a staggered approach for Africa and for the global South to say that we cannot just transition immediately to renewables or to clean energy, but that we also need a staggered approach to allow for development and proper opportunities to basically happen within the global South. I think a challenge, also controversial, is that America's current stance as well. They've pulled out of some agreements. They've backtracked on some of the talks in terms of renewable energy. They've re-signed some more oil deals and some more coal deals. So as a miner, it's quite tough because there is obviously that push to say that production is key, but it also is very clear that as a global population, we need to understand that ESG is a real issue, and that we need to basically start protecting not just our Earth, but the communities in which we operate in. And then lastly, in terms of challenges, greenwashing is a thing. So greenwashing essentially is when companies essentially imitate the implementation of ESG practices. So you maybe are just buying carbon credits, or you are saying that maybe you've bought a hybrid vehicle or something, and now you're saying that you are green and you are ESG compliant and whatnot, but you actually just are doing the bare minimum basically and still getting all the benefits of being an ESG company. So that's also a challenge to say that to ensure that corporations and organizations are actually implementing ESG practices environmentally and socially properly, and not just reaping the benefits and the good press basically of implementing ESG. I'll hand over to my colleague Leander to take us through a few of the climate change risks.
Thank you, Laura, and good afternoon, everyone. On this slide, we're looking at the direct physical impacts of climate change that already affect mining operations. So why this matters for us in mining is that, you've got extreme heat that degrades equipment performance, extreme heat that can affect worker comfort, as well as making changes to energy demand profiles. So floods and extreme storm events threaten critical infrastructure, most importantly. So they were talking conveyors, roads, power systems, all things that are critical to the operation of mining. So these are things that can affect or even stop the production activities, and more critically, with long repair schedules. So then the operational consequence is really simple. It's that climate risks translate into safety exposures. It affects availability of equipment or infrastructure, and also then results in higher life cycle costs. So then the engineering response must therefore be proactive and incorporate climate stress testing into design standards. So that is to ensure that our equipment infrastructure are designed to be resilient. And obviously there would be a cost component to that. So if anything, I think we've also seen in South Africa the floodings in KZN and how that's affected the communities there and around. And in some of the mining operations within the country, there's been extreme heat if you're looking at the north. So these are all things that previously, the severity of the weather patterns were not as bad. So these are things that we need to think about so that we can proactively manage these challenges that are brought about by climate change. So then, given these physical impacts, going to this next slide, the way we measure and manage emissions then becomes critical. So on this slide, we define the three scopes that we use to account for greenhouse gas emissions, which form the foundation of any decarbonization strategy or plan. So just to recap, scope one, those are the direct emissions. So those are the emissions we own or control. In mining, within the mining context, this is primarily fuel combustion from haul trucks and so forth. And then scope two, those are the indirect emissions. And again, within the mining context, that would largely refer to purchased electricity. So for many operations, grid supplied power is a major portion of site emissions, and that's given by the fact that Eskom's energy mix is largely dependent on coal, which has got high emission factors. So, and then scope three being the last one, that's the indirect emissions, but then that speaks to the value chain impact, both upstream, if we're talking suppliers, the transportation of our material, as well as downstream. And I think the key takeaway from this particular slide is that the robust emissions reduction pathway must address all three scopes. So I think just going back to what Theodora touched on, insofar as distinguishing between carbon neutrality and net zero. So you'd find that a lot of the mining companies are actually pursuing the carbon neutrality pathway for the reasons that Theodora has mentioned. So under the carbon neutrality process, we report on scope 1 and 2 and scope 3. So then we can go to the next slide, please. And then here, talking to the Climate Change Act or the legislation and legalities around this space. So South Africa's Climate Change Act was enacted in July 2024, which establishes a clear framework that moves climate policy from guidance to enforceable mechanisms. So the Act introduces 4 principles, mainly carbon, what's been shown there, number 1, carbon budget, sectoral emissions targets, carbon tax, and adaptation. So carbon budgets allocate an emissions allowance to an organization over a defined period. And this means, and then sectoral emissions targets will set reduction trajectories for the collective mining industry as a whole. Then the carbon tax places a direct financial cost on scope 1 emissions, that's the direct now, which then immediately affects operating margins where fuel emissions are material. And then so now for mining companies, the immediate implications are namely 1, emissions become a budgeted business input, right? And then number 2, and then that goes back again to the issue of greenwashing and so forth. And then number 2, the CAPEX and OPEX decisions must consider carbon pricing and budget impacts as well. And thirdly, adaptation planning must be demonstrated insofar as the organization pursues its objectives. Practically, this changes how we prioritize investments then, because investing in initiatives such as energy efficiency improvement or low carbon, if we're talking biofuel, as Dora alluded to earlier on, becomes important. So I think that's the last slide. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Leander. So just briefly to contextualize ESG in the mining industry, I think Leander's also given us a good briefing from an environmental point of view. I think also just to note, we always need to keep in mind that ESG is, and I think the G is always the one that actually falls by the wayside, but it's environmental, social, and governance that are coming into play. And I think social is also very key. And in 1994, basically health and safety, post-1994, should I say, health and safety became a very key focus area in mining, because I actually had a look in 1993, the number of mining deaths recorded, and this is across all mining industries, so this is gold, platinum, diamonds, coal, was 616 deaths in 1993. So you can just see that there was not a high priority placed on health and safety in terms of extracting the value from the land. But as of 2024, the deaths have reduced to 42. So while 42 deaths is still 42 too many, I think we can see that there's been a vast improvement in terms of prioritizing health and safety within the mining industry. Sustainability, as Leander has spoken to briefly, has also become legislated. So not just in terms of environmental, but socially as well. So in terms of the NEMA, the National Environmental Management Act, in terms of the Mine Health and Safety Act, the Mineral Petroleum Resources and Development Act, these are all acts that have basically been put in place to ensure that environmental and social priorities have been put in place and that people are actually being prioritized, as well as the environment is being prioritized. And then institutions such as the Department of Water and Sanitation, as well as the Department of Minerals and Petroleum Resources, are also there to regulate the mining industry to ensure that, we have things like the GN 704, which implements the separation of clean and dirty water. The Mine Health and Safety Act ensures that we have legislation in place in terms of like collision avoidance, in terms of, heat stress and any of those things, basically to ensure that we're not only looking after the environment, but also looking after the people as well. Then also these acts, or like this, for example, say the Department of Water and Sanitation, they basically hold a license to operate. So they would provide mining companies with their water use licenses. So a lot of these stipulations basically are put in place to ensure that when you are granted a water use license, you have to stick to specific aspects or adhere to specific consensus or concessions within that license to operate. So basically, this is also another way in which mining companies are governed and ensure that you protect the environment as well as the people. Then also, in terms of governance, the JSE also launched its own social responsibility investment framework in 2004. But also what that means is that a lot of listed companies also like to basically ensure that the ESG metrics are up to scratch, and they basically are adhering to ESG targets and goals, because that also gets you basically investor confidence, and basically it brings shareholders and stakeholders into your business and into your portfolio. So it basically makes your company more attractive by ensuring that you appropriately address ESG concerns within your organization. And then, as noted as well, the big aim in the mining industry is emissions reduction. So scope 1, 2, and 3, as was earlier described by Leander, is the big drive across mining is to reduce emissions by trying to, as far as possible, either through technology, well, mainly through technology, to try and basically reduce emissions, both directly and indirectly linked to your organization. Kaliwe will now take us through the technology and innovation portions of the presentation.
Thank you, Theodora, and good evening, everyone. So as Dora just mentioned now, and she touched on it on her previous slides, technology readiness is a factor for the industry, because you have a lot of aspirations to get to carbon neutrality, because in South Africa, we have that issue. We have coal, and we won't run away from that fact that it's our biggest economic driver. So we need to get to carbon neutrality. So technology readiness is key to ensuring that we meet that target. Dora, can you hear me? Sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, apologies. So I just highlighted a few things, like with the history of mining, technology aims to change that traditional image of mining as the dirty, dangerous, and environmentally destructive industry. We want to change it to a safe one where people can feel that they can work in it and they can go home at the end of the day. And that's what is driven through safety in most mining houses, in all mining houses, in fact. And also through technology, ESG can be transformed as well from a reactive reporting exercise into a predictive, proactive, integrated, and core business function. Because from there, we get the investment that Dora just touched on right now as a requirement for operation and for licensing as well in future probably. This through the enablement of mining companies to measure with precision, which is what we want. We want trusted data to present to the public, to present to the investors, and also to ensure growth in our organizations. And we all know that mines are not just for productivity. The aim is to reduce costs. The key focus areas is cost reduction, productivity, and safety. And this is where ESG claims a biggest role. So technology will drive that, because when we look at the environmental aspect of it, we are looking at reducing our carbon footprint. And when we're looking at the social aspect of it, we are looking at protecting the people and the environment and empowering the people so that they can challenge organizations to say, this is not acceptable, and because this is where we exist and this is where we live. And governance will ensure accountability and transparency. So key technologies that I wanted to touch on today were the ones that, not the least, but the ones that touch on civil. I hope I touched on what you guys are focusing on. You have the tailings dam, tailings storage facilities, whereby it is now the requirement from the global industry on tailings management to comply. South African companies that comply to this have been said to be Sibanye does it, Anglo does it, and even Exxaro does it, but not to the full extent that we can claim that we are done complying to that, moving away from the SANS standards that we are currently following, which is SANS 10286. So with that, the requirement to have continuous monitoring with automated alert to ensure safety, and you have data that helps you predict potential failures and prevent safety and risk in the tailings facilities. And we've had incidents in South Africa that have cost communities their lives. So we need to have this in place. That's through technology, which will then focus on improving safety and also ensuring the restoration of ecosystems and landscapes. When we look at the circular economy, their technology focuses on promoting sustainable jobs in recycling and resourcing recovery. Boliden in Sweden and Finland have reported that their recycling rate of water is 95%, is 90%. And South Africa can do this through the right measuring and monitoring tools that exist as well. We have the EU ensuring that they have a project. The whole EU has a project running to ensure reuse of processed water. Also, AI. Everyone uses AI. I'm not even going to touch on what we use it for, but that's technology that is focused on improving operational integrity and reducing downtime. We have your digital twins that exist in some of the Mpumalanga mines to ensure that you simulate water intensity, equipment behavior for optimization. And lastly, you have your renewable energies, and Luanda touched on this. Also, Dora touched on this. I've had a pleasure of visiting a Zambia mine in First Quantum in Kanshanta, There they use hydropower because they have excess water. But that's also technology eliminating the use of fossil fuels in the area and ensuring that they reduce their carbon footprint as well. Not only these four that please go back. Thanks, Dee. Not only are we focusing on these on the technology space, right now you have companies like Komatsu, Hitachi, and Seni, XCMG, looking at electrifying their fleet so that they can reduce their fossil fuel usage. You also have companies like Cummins and MTU, who have moved away from using fossil fuels into either looking into ethanol and HVO, which has been approved. Recently, we saw in the news that Anglo has signed a memorandum of understanding with Sasol to look into the development of HVO. So you do have options. Next slide. So what does the future hold for technology and innovation as we look into the future to ensure that, as Dora put it, we leave the world how we found it? We won't be able to leave it exactly how we found it, but we can try. So it's said that a strong ESG currently performance is not a nice to have. It's a global standard. It's how you get your funding. It's how you get your reputational, your reputation as a good employer in the country, in the industry, in the world. So we need to ensure that we comply with the ESG, but we have challenges as well. It's new. No one knows it, and people don't trust it. It's difficult to trust something that Dora said in the first slide is not going to give you financial gains, but reputational gains instead. And so when you look at the opportunities that exist, you're looking at your data insight, you can get accurate data there so that you make decisions quick, fast, and immediately. You have proactive strategies that you can implement so that you prevent failures before they occur. And you save costs because that's what we want. Remember, we're in the business of making money as well. You need to be transparent so that you build trust amongst the people that you work for, work with, and work amongst. So build verifiable trust with stakeholders. Implementation, you need to drive operational effectiveness and empower employees. Hence, we have the technology triangle that we use in my organization to ensure that whatever technology we bring touches on the people side of things. We can't be bringing technology that no one else in the organization can use. It needs to talk to each other. That way, we need to ensure that our people are skilled. It's an opportunity for growth as well for the people, for the organization, and for the country. When we look at the risk of all of those and challenges, you have data overload. Currently, I can click anywhere and get enough data to tell me that I'm right, even though I'm wrong. How do you trust that data? And how do you avoid getting too much data that you stop making a decision and you still feel that you need more? Analysis paralysis, it has happened, and I'm assuming, and I know all of you are professionals who had to write and submit some form of report, and you wondered, is this enough to convince whoever I'm trying to convince that I know what I'm talking about? Challenge number 2, greenwashing. Dora touched on, I won't linger on that. It's a problem that people can use as well. Transparency, centralized data creates a major cybersecurity target. We've seen in the airports recently, cybersecurity risks that exist there. But I'm not saying it's because of transparency, I'm just saying. And you have implementation where it's siloed systems that exist that we are trying to break away from in the organizations. We have a skills gap. We have a skills gap in South Africa. It's been said time and time again. As we transition with technology, can we definitely say that our people are ready for the technology that is coming in? Currently, some of the mines can't even automate because of the risk that will exist should you automate. Is that the best technology for South Africa currently? Or can we do something better? Governance and ethics, the biasness, it's still man-made, still man-managed, so you need to avoid biases as well. So you have all of these in place on technology. And Leanda, I think, is going to continue to touch on how we've tried to implement some of the technologies in the industry. We've created alliances with some of the big houses as well, like I mentioned, working towards electrifying their fleets. Some are near ready, some are telling the organizations that they'll be ready in 2030. The first reporting for carbon neutrality has been reported to be 2030. So it means by the time their fleets are ready, we'll still be behind. We are Africa after all. Priority won't be given to us with those fleets, electrified fleets. That we also need to take into consideration. So what do we do with technology and innovation in the meantime to capitalize on what we have? That is what we need to think about as we move forward with the implementation of ESG and climate change mitigating factors. Thanks, Dora. Leanda?
Thanks, Kelly. So energy management is the single most practical bridge between operational performance and decarbonization outcomes. There are 4 business reasons to prioritize energy management immediately. Number 1, it enables the decarbonization pathways. And now I'm talking energy efficiency initiatives or the clean self-generation projects that the team spoke to earlier on. Secondly, energy management delivers cost optimization by reducing energy spend. So typically what you'll find, I mean, in an open cast, as an example, open cast mining operation, diesel it generally accounts for anything between, say, 45 to 50% of the total energy consumption. So for fairly significant or big mining operations, we're talking millions of liters of diesel, which then go under the OPEX costs. And then the third reason to prioritize energy management is that it ensures regulatory compliance against evolving reporting and budgeting. And then lastly, it supports ESG-linked incentive schemes where energy performance is measured. From a strategic perspective, energy management ties directly to what has always mattered in mining, namely safety, productivity, availability, as well as legislation or compliance, while over and above that, adding the new imperatives of environmental performance and decarbonization. Practically, this means embedding energy management into operations. For example, real-time, Kelly was speaking about automation. So that's where now real-time energy management systems become important, as well as embedding, as I've mentioned previously, energy management into the GIS or the incentive scheme-linked KPIs. Thirdly, into capital planning. So this is now looking at the life cycle energy impact, as I spoke to earlier on, looking at the fuel. And then lastly, if we're talking governance, we are talking from a clear ownership and reporting and continuous improvement point of view. Energy projects are often the fastest, which is now, I think, so it's clearly we spoke earlier on about the fact that a lot of the technology has not quite matured to the point where it's commercially available. So there's a lot of like testing and piloting happening in the short term. So if we are just looking at from a roadmap point of view, after extensive consultation with various players in the space, we're looking at anything between, say, 2030 and 2035, where we'll start getting commercial availability of some of these technologies to help mining houses to decarbonize. So then in that gap, in the short term, energy management, as I've said, it becomes quite an important lever, and that is because energy projects are often the fastest payback decarbonization measures available. So, for example, we're talking lighting controls, installing variable speed drives, for instance, in your conveyor systems. Implementing fleet fuel efficiency programs, as well as optimization of various processes such as heating. And then when you pair these short-term energy efficiency measures with longer-term investments like renewables and equipment electrification to form a balanced pathway, it then reduces the risk and actually becomes a big driver towards mining houses achieving their decarbonization objectives insofar as reducing their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So I think the key takeaway from this slide is that when you manage energy well, you improve resilience, you lower costs, and then you are able to meet the new regulatory imperatives as well as investor expectations. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kagiso, and we'll be taking you through social impact, cost, and as well as how ESG impacts project delivery in the mining industry. So looking at social impact, it's one of the most critical aspects of sustainability. And, it talks about going beyond compliance and speaking directly to how these mining operations can create shared value with their host communities. And essentially, it's about that shared value. And as Dora mentioned earlier, sustainability has been legislated. So in South African context, we look at social and labor plans as well as mineral succession planning. So these frameworks are designed to ensure that communities benefit meaningfully from these mining activities. And it's not just about life during the mine and beyond closure, they need to have value. So implementing these frameworks, or rather spending money on social impact initiatives, increases short-term costs, yes, and a lot of, as some of the presenters spoke, these ESG-driven initiatives are very capital intensive, but it is critical to remember that these investments will significantly reduce the long-term risks such as community unrest, project delays, and social license to operate, which like speaks to the legislation. So you are required to spend the money on those initiatives. And the cost of these risks, when you look at them, are much higher than the cost that you would pay in complying. And when you look at what communities really expect, it's in and around employment and training opportunities. It's about skills development. You don't want host communities to just be given unskilled labor work, and you want to have a meaningful impact into their lives, and so that when you move out of that, then you have created value, you have created a secondary economy, and not just on the workforce. When we speak of local procurement as well, which helps build small businesses, and it keeps circulating that value within the community. And we also look at um, infrastructure. So communities expect certain infrastructure like roads, clean drinking water, and schools for their children. So that's in essence what the communities really expect. And when we approach social impact as a strategic investment through these initiatives, we strengthen trust and build local capacity, and we also create a legacy that extends beyond the mine life. So, yes, there is a cost attached to it, but let's look at it that it really pays dividends. in, just the long-term value for both the company and the community. So when we look at the next slide now, traditionally, when you think about a project, uh, we were worried about if a project is successful, it means that it has been completed on time, within budget, and with quality, and also within the scope that was agreed. But now, when we move more to the ESG KPI embedment, and now we will look as we continue. Dora, please move to the next slide. We now see how we integrate ESG into the mining, into project delivery in mining. So it's mining project now require broader consultations with stakeholders from local communities and as well as regulators. We have different regulators from water to the DMPR or DMRE. So all these, as well as the employees and investors, all these are key stakeholders that need to be included into this integration process. And when we look at also how these KPIs that I mentioned earlier, that now we are no longer just focusing on cost, budget, scope, and quality. We are now embedding the some of these ESG related KPIs. I spoke earlier about social impact. I think a lot has been said about carbon reduction. We need to also uh, do good water management, energy efficiency, as mentioned previously. Waste management is a very critical KPI as well. So all of these KPIs now have to be embedded into the project KPIs, and we measure now the success of the project, not just that the project was delivered successfully on time, within budget, and in the right scope. So it's important to embed these ESG KPIs because we see some of these benefits, as Dora mentioned earlier about green lending. Now, we see stronger investor confidence and easier access to sustainable financing. So I think that really does help, especially if you want to develop. We spoke earlier about scope 2 emissions. So if you want to develop solar power, so usually that goes through the funding. Excuse me. Yeah. So that does help you in terms of, green lending. And the projects now become more efficient and innovative, leading to reduced long-term operating costs. And it was mentioned again about relationships with stakeholders. Now, one of the key stakeholders is the community. Once you have embedded these ESG KPIs, now you have better improved relationships with communities, and this will lower risks of disruptions. And we also now projects are designed to be more resilient. Leonda mentioned climate change risks. So it doesn't help to have an asset and it's not ready for the climate change that is about to happen. So we have to build climate resilient assets that will, overcome this climate change. So in essence, ESG embedment transforms projects from just being short-term deliverables and now being more of strategic assets that will add value. So we look at now ESG-driven project delivery from operations to closure. So every mine basically needs to have an environmental and social compliance from the beginning. So from when you start. So we have what we call the license to operate, which looks at certain certain requirements that you need to meet in order for you to have this license to operate. And now it talks about, you having to upskill the communities, as I said earlier, to grow the SMMEs in the area, to build community infrastructure and all of that. And now we look at mine closure. So with mine closure and rehabilitation, uh, it's now land rehabilitation has now become a strategic priority, and you can't just now you mine and then you leave the area as like it's now you have destroyed the ecosystem now of that area. So I think it's important to do the mine closure and rehabilitation planning well in advance. And it's no longer just now you shut down the site and you go. You need to restore the ecosystem. You need to ensure that there is water quality, because you can have instances where uh, water becomes contaminated, and that affects your reputation as a mining company. So you need to ensure there's no decanting and things like that. And you also, part of the mine closure and rehabilitation planning, maybe if some of your infrastructure is not so old, you can think about repurposing that infrastructure for community use. Maybe you build training centers, schools, and things like that. And we know that closure and rehabilitation comes with a cost, but it is a requirement for mining companies to make an allowance for mine closure costs well in advance. So while you're during operations, you need to have a fund that you create so that you will be able to pay for mine closure and rehabilitation. So mine closure and rehabilitation is also about just when this land has been repurposed, then you can have agriculture and renewable energy now happening in the area. With agriculture, it could be farming or anything that will benefit the community and that will ensure that there is a transition. As I mentioned, that there's a mineral succession planning is about having that transition and enabling communities to have an economy beyond the mine life. So ESG driven delivery isn't just about a regulatory requirement. It's a way of ensuring that mining projects leave behind lasting value instead of long-term liabilities. So yeah, that's where now the just transition also comes in. So I think for the sake of time, I will give over to Theodora to just conclude for us.
Thanks, Becky. So hopefully you can't hear the rain that's happening in the background of my house. But basically, just to note from an ESG point of view, I think we can see from the presentations that have been delivered that ESG is basically reshaping how mines operate, how they plan, how they even do closure, as Kahiso just spoke to. So ESG has become it's not just a buzzword; it's now a key focus area that mining houses need to comply to ensure a just transition. And I think a just transition is key because, as Kahiso noted, we can't leave communities behind. So you can't just mine an area to an arid condition and then just abandon it there. We need to be able to create. Sorry, I'm not sure if somebody's unmuted. Okay. So we need to ensure that we leave the environment and the communities basically in as good a condition as we found them. I think the aim as well for ESG in terms of social is to ensure that, this dereliction that we find in these abandoned mining towns or in these towns where mines have demobbed, we can still see life and secondary and tertiary economies still thriving in those areas, not just that now the mine is closed, the community must also now be negatively impacted. So the aim is for a just transition to happen and that is being pushed through ESG, through these different frameworks that are being presented within legislation. It's also to note that, as we noted, there is capital intensivity at the beginning of all ESG projects. So these are not small projects. These are all projects that cost in the hundreds of billions of rands, unfortunately. But I think that's to note that although there will be immediate expenditure, I think the long-term benefits and value by doing things properly, by doing things with an environmental and a social framework in mind, will ensure that although cost is high in the onset, longevity and sustainability will carry these projects through, will carry communities through, and will carry the environment through for future generations. And I think, yeah, long-term value, as I noted, will outweigh the short-term need for profit. Profit is still key. I don't think I want to stress that. I think we all work for a living, and we work for companies and organizations that need to make profits. But it's just to note that small concessions within profit can create long-term great leaps and bounds of value within communities. And I think lastly, we have spoken about technology readiness as well. So it's just to note that I think once technology becomes readily available, it will be easier to transition some of these transition away, should I say, from some of these aspects. But I think that yeah, basically ESG, we should make it something that is here to stay. It shouldn't be a fleeting fad. It should be something that we can push forward to create sustainability and to provide for future generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Dora and the team. We can now just quickly move on to the Q&A session. So are there any questions from the attendees? If you can raise your hand, and then we can answer them as we go. All right, I see a hand from Molly. Hi, Molly.
Hi, Chairperson. Hope you're good, and like to say hi to everyone who's part and parcel of the meeting. First of all, I'd like to appreciate the very insightful presentation from both presenters, Ms. Xolo and Mr. Kagiso. As I've written on the chat to say, I'd love to have the presentation from Mr. Kagiso. However, it's more of a comment to me because, you know, it's so great to see us being more actually one step towards you know, the carbon emission, knowing that we are the big contributor in the country of that, because I am actually very much aware that our communities, they live in fear because of how you know, we are contributing, especially on the mining sector. And I heard that he has touched on the jet base and all that. Just to share with maybe the house, I think there was a presentation that was presented by Prof. Valley to say there's an innovative system as well that is going to be capturing the carbon from Earth, and it will be stored somehow. I wish that can be fast tracked as well. I know that it's costly and all that, but however, I'm actually very excited as a jet champion as well to see that we are doing something in South Africa as you know, in the space of carbon footprint. Because if you don't do it now, there's never tomorrow. I thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Molly, for that great feedback. There's a hand from Kisimusi.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair, for my question is directed to Kagiso. I just want to find out, I heard he touched on the pollution of water or contamination of water through the mines. So I want to find out if do they have mechanism or system in place in order to detect the contamination, or what system do they use to see that the water is contaminated, beside having the visuals of the water or doing site inspections. Because we're moving into technological now, probably I know that there are tools that can be applied in order to fast track the process to determine the contamination. So I just want to see if they have systems to see the contamination or detect them without maybe going to the river disposed to. Thank you.
Thanks, Kisumusi, for the question. So as far as I know, at the moment, we still measure in situ. I don't know if there's maybe my colleagues could correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, we do go on site and measure at different areas to ensure that there is no contamination. But I don't know of current or new technological advancements that will sort of assist with virtual monitoring.
Just to jump in as well. So Kaki is correct. So it's basically on-site in situ monitoring at periodic time frames. So maybe every 6 months you can go monitor the area. But I also note that in terms of modeling, when we are doing our water balances and our water salt balance models, you can actually use predictive analytics to determine the salt loads and basically the potential decant of your specific mining house or mining areas. So basically you can through modeling, just predict what areas will decant and in what time periods, and then you can sort of try and use basically monitoring, then basically water monitoring in the area to ensure that you can catch that pollution. And I think also you can then from the predictive modeling, you can also then note that in 20 years we might have decant, so you can also start planning right now to say let us start putting systems in place to ensure that once the decant is actually happening, or if it happens, basically that we can, the water treatment plants is in place, or if we're doing slow systems, maybe some sort of side system is in place to ensure that the pollution or the water is not contaminating any clean sources. But yeah.
Thank you, Dora. We have a hand from Sipho Setu.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Good evening to the panel. Thank you, Chairperson. I'm from the Eastern Cape, so some of these issues touch us very, very deeply because our province is let's call it special for now. There's we've had quite a few community unrests, and these are more of comments more than questions. We've had quite a few community unrest situations where the community doesn't know what's going on, and the community isn't aware of all the benefits that would come from mining and such issues. So I'm hoping that this process could maybe be rolled out and more education is brought to the people for them to understand all the processes and also this information, because I'm quite sure if more people knew about these things and that they're being taken care of, then maybe there would be less issues and causing our projects to stall and things like that, and then further affects the expenditure on projects. Is further then Treasury has to take monies back and everything. And the other issue was I'm hoping that this process doesn't take us to a point where the big countries that have been pillaging our resources for years, let's call it decades or hundreds of years, get to a point where they are now at a position where they're talking about climate change. Like you did mention, it was mentioned in the presentation where the climate change and us not finishing the resources and everything, but also being aware of the fact that we also have to grow our economies off those resources. So I'm hoping that that will also come into effect as this becomes common knowledge to everyone. Thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Siposetu. I don't see any other hands. Is there anyone that? Okay, I see Brandon. Hi, Brandon.
Hi, Ntamundo, and thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm not sure if I missed it, but I just wanted maybe just to ask a question on the process. I mean the project development phase. When are we actually supposed to actually include or maybe involve the environmental studies, and when are we supposed to involve the impact of the ESGs, and also in terms of that, how is that going to affect our project development phase in terms of specifying the materials as well? Does it go to extent where it actually contribute in the identifying the type of the material that can be used in the construction space?
Yeah, thanks, Brandon, for that question. We didn't touch on it, but I think it's for ESG to be incorporated, it needs to be done at the onset of a project. So when you're already in development, so let's say at conceptual design, or you're in a pre-feasibility design phase already, then we should start looking at ESG KPIs and what we're looking to measure on projects. So I think what would be good is to have a baseline. So if you're starting a project, to understand what the status quo is of you know, the water management or your energy management, biodiversity, and the like, and then to basically, I see somebody to put in the comment exactly to, it also helps you build your business case. So I think at the onset of your project, you can use ESG not just as, because I think a lot of the time project managers see it as an additional step, but it can actually be a supporting step to help you build a business case to ensure that, you know, your project actually makes sense, maybe not financially, but it makes sense in terms of ESG. So right at the beginning, and it definitely can help you in terms of choosing the materials, because I think Leanda and Kakis touched on it, and I think Liliwe as well, where, you know, when you're designing for robust systems, you can actually look and see using, you know, I know we will design for 1 in 50 year floods, but, you know, now maybe it's actually becoming more and more frequent that we need to design some of these small infrastructure to actually include 1 in 50 year flood, not just 1 in 10 or 1 in 20. So I think it will help you in terms of designing or capacitating the systems, but also in terms of materials, you can definitely start saying what can be used in certain areas depending on what's not happening in terms of the climate in your environment. So it definitely can help you in terms of that as well.
Yes, thanks, Dora, for that. We have a hand from Sihakweng. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly.
You did better than most. Good afternoon. I have a question regarding, maybe I might have missed it in the presentation, if the is the concept regulated or legislated? And two, you know, in the engineering space, or let's say in the civil space rather, especially when you come to I want to say roads contracts and the like, if it's not included, let's say by a client, for example, we can implement it from a design perspective. But ultimately, the person who's building is the one that dictates where they get, unless we stipulate it within the contract document, where they get and source material. Now you find yourself, you're located in areas that are remote, and to now start exercising or practicing sustainability practices in a remote location makes conflicts with the whole completing a successful project model. I think it was mentioned earlier, where it's done with quality, efficiency, and also the experience of the people that are implementing these newer type of materials and the like. So for me, it's going to be an industry change, not just from the design philosophy perspective or the theoretical, if you will, where the implementers of those changes are going to have to be, I want to say, legislated or contracted to implement. Otherwise, you know, or rather, it almost has to be the same way we forced or insisted that a local 30% local content is dedicated, it has to be implemented in the same way for its success in the future. And that I think for me, the client needs to be convinced, and us as implementers for the client's wishes, then we can execute. Because we come into conflict. If I instruct now the contractor, he's going to say to me, where's the money to do that? Who's going to give me the money to do that? I am sourcing in material. I am going into spaces where I can make a profit and also build what I've been instructed to build. So that for me is maybe a point, sort of a question: is it legislated? Is it regulated? Is it implemented? And as far as, let's say, our goals are concerned, our SDG goals are concerned in terms of the construction industry, for example. Now, if you can also implement those strategies at, let's say, our developing contractors, for example, and now it's them that has to be the implementers at that level. It also puts a strain. And how do we now train these guys to also start consciously thinking? Because now they're in the industry to essentially grow monetarily and experientially. And when we implement a system that's now capital or rather initial investment heavy, but long-term sustainable, for them, it's not bread and butter. You understand? If you are growing, you are not concerned about the long-term effects. It's the reality of where we find ourselves. So how do we bridge the gap as well? Where we now, I think somebody mentioned about education, community education regarding that. How are we going to translate these goals to the layman who can barely put food on the table? I think that's my question.
Leander, go for it.
I'd like to take a stab at this question. It's quite loaded, but I think these are the things that the industry as a whole is grappling with. And I think this is where now the just energy transition principles become important. That you don't just do things for the sake of doing them, but as Dora spoke to earlier on in responding to Brendan's question, during the project development phase of the project, the earlier you actually start bringing in these ESG KPIs and measures into your project planning or development, the better. Because eventually, whenever your project then gets to the relevant investment review committee for approval.
Hey, move it. Hey, move it.
Yeah, I think someone's mic is unmuted. Yeah, so I think you're always going to make a trade-off, right? Between the perfect design, you are designing for 1 in 100 year flood. Yes, it will be good, but there's going to be a cost impact. So I think what's important is that you need to understand for any project that you're doing, what is the impact on the ESG metrics. And then in terms of, the challenges between the implementers when you're executing and so forth, I think what I'll say to that is that decarbonization and ESG as a whole, it needs to be a strategic imperative that is driven from the top, of the organization that is implementing it. Because if the leadership doesn't quite understand or see the value or sense of driving sustainability, then the implementers or the executors, the engineers, the consultants, the contractors will obviously have a challenge. So, and I think that's where then governance becomes very key to this, to say that For instance, so now the project has been approved and it's going out through the procurement process. So, you've already rightly said, quite often there is that 30%, as you put it, requirement for local labor. Then you can also start looking at things like, what type of equipment or material are you procuring from where? So that as the client who's issuing out the contract or the job, they will also be able to, in a fair way, adjudicate the submissions for whoever wants to do the job. So I think, in short, governance is quite critical. Number two, it has to be a leadership-driven journey. So I think I'll just leave it there. Maybe Dora or Teli has got something else to add. Thanks.
Yeah, I think Akis's hand is up, but I just wanted to jump in and say that, in terms of the mining industry, I think it is more legislated, but in terms of construction, and I know in terms of most civil projects that are private sector driven, it is not mandated. It's not a requirement. So it is something that will probably need to start being driven from a governmental point of view. But for now, in the mining industry, I think it is pretty well in hand in that sense. And it's not to say that every project in the mining industry has ESG. It's just to say that the mining industry is more cognizant of it, and there are more attempts to try and ensure that projects are more ESG driven, and that they basically can improve the environment or the social aspect of the community engagements. So I think, to answer that question, I think that's just to say that in mining industry, it's more legislated, but in terms of construction and private sector, it is not yet mandated in that sense. Okay, so I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
No, thanks, Leonda and Dora. Well put. I have very little to add after you've spoken, Dora. But just maybe one key thing here. You've may have missed some of the points from the question, but the cost element. So essentially, the asset owner is the one that carries the cost. You, as an executor or an implementer, you just carry it down. So if they mandate green procurement, if it's expensive, it's not on you, it's on the asset owner. Green procurement could be in different things like buying more efficient pumps, motors, and installing VSDs and the likes, and on local spend as well, and SMME development. I know these generally in construction as an EPC or an EPCM or a contractor, you are required as soon as you get appointed to do local spend. But I think it's to your discretion as to where that local spend goes. So I don't think in any way it puts you to a disadvantage. So I think everything else has been said by the previous two speakers. Thanks.
All right, thank you, team. We can now approach the end of our session. So maybe just to tie up the whole presentation and discussion today, I will ask the panels in 30 seconds or less what you feel would be the most single important message or call to action that you'd like our audience to take away from today's discussion, and what they can possibly apply in their work going forward.
Wow, the pressure. I would just say from my side, I think, as you noted, I think ESG considerations need to come to the forefront in project development and in project delivery. I think also climate change as well. We need to start understanding that, especially in terms of civil design, civil engineering design, we've seen that there's a lot of our past design standards and stuff may not actually be as relevant as they have been in the past due to just climate change, excessive flooding, excessive heat. So just to note that you need to be cognizant of not just climate change, but also ESG impacts and KPIs in your project development to ensure that you have a successful project delivery from my side. Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
Dora.
So it's popcorn style, Dlamu. So from my side, I think I just want to highlight the importance of aligning with your partners, your suppliers, to ensure that you guys reach that decarbonization, that ESG conversations together, because they are your people, your suppliers, especially for the equipment. So I'll talk on the equipment side. The equipment needs to talk to your journey. And Leander touched on it on the strategy side. It needs to be a journey. If it's not on the organization's strategical priorities, it won't be done. So you need to have your partnerships in place. Your suppliers, big suppliers in big mining houses are ready to sit with the people, your XMGs, your Seni, your Komatsus, your Hitachis, and your engine motor suppliers as well. You need to discuss with them, how are they transitioning from your diesel usage to renewable energy sources. So I think the partnerships for me, I want to drive that, to say you won't be able to do it alone, but it needs to come as a journey for all the people, all the stakeholders in your business. They need to be aligned with your focus and your vision so that you all get there at the end of the day. Thanks, Kamulo, and the participants and the groups.
Thank you, Teli.
Really, I think very, very well said. I think collaboration is quite key, as whatever sector that you're operating in. But for me, I would just like to stress, I think, the importance of education. I mean, if you look at the rapid development of technology, AI, and so forth, it really, calls for us, as engineers or scientists, that you continuously get yourselves equipped with the relevant skills to be able to move, with these changes and not to be left behind. And I think that is definitely one of my biggest concerns. I think Kweng spoke to it earlier on. Apologies if I've pronounced your name incorrectly, but for the communities, it's also something that I think about a lot. And communities could be, the new learners coming onto the system. How do we better prepare our educational institutions to be able to provide how can I say, workers, for lack of a better word, who will be able to move with the rapid changes. I think even as myself, as an engineer with over 12 years experience, I also think about AI and what it means. We are seeing a lot of roles and industries being made redundant because of AI. So I think it's not something that we should look at as in a fearful way, but we need to understand that education does become important. There's a lot of changes that will come about, particularly in the mining industry, because of the sustainability or environmental objectives. If you're going to change your diesel-powered haul truck fleet to electric powered vehicles, what does it mean for the infrastructure? What does it mean for the teams that maintain and operate this equipment, who previously or historically are used to operating diesel powered engines? So we're obviously thinking safety, we're thinking equipment availability and so forth. So I think that's what I'd like to leave as my final departing point. And thank you all for taking time to come through and hear us out. And thank you, Tlamulo and the team, for inviting us. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, Luyanda. Kagiso, any parting words?
Yep, just 2 words from me. Well, not 2, but a few. I think the colleagues have already spoken a mouthful, but just maybe some concluding remarks from myself. Just transition in and of itself is about trust, transparency, inclusion, and having tangible actions. And whatever you do, just always think about how does that affects the people and the environment, because we want to leave the world in a better position or in the same position as we found it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kagiso. So we'll just bring the fireside chat to a close.